My name's Emma. Welcome back. Today we are talking about the Friends reunion. When it comes to choices and decisions, the ones that we make every single day will help us create the world that we want to live in. That's what we talk about here on this channel. How can we take lessons that exist all around us, bring them into our own lives, and create the life that we want to live? The Friends reunion was aired on May 27th on HBO, and it chronicled the journey of the 6 main characters of the show Friends and talked about how they experienced the show, how they got to the show, what they felt about the show, and of course we were brought down memory lane and had wonderful dialogue about how the show was created and the connection between the characters. The show was aired in 1994 and lasted until 2004, and during those 10 seasons, 10 years of production, the characters and the actors became beloved across the entire world. And up to now, the show has been aired and watched over 100 billion times. Imagine that. And why was it such a successful show? Well, it is because of the integration of the audience into the production of the show. And you may be wondering, how were they able to integrate the audience in 1994? And due to the fact that Friends was a sitcom, and most sitcoms at the time and to this day are still filmed in front of a live audience and don't often try to use laugh tracks, and they definitely didn't back then. They had a live studio audience that was actually laughing as these jokes were said, and that is how the writers of the show really began to understand which jokes to keep in and which jokes to remove, and they did this on the spot. They would film these episodes one day and they would have to cut and produce it after, but the live studio audience was always there to help the production team figure out, okay, we're going to keep this joke, we're going to remove it, we need to insert a new one here. And due to the fact that they were so receptive to what the audience was saying, instead of being offended by jokes not being delivered or being brought across the way that they wanted to, they were able to create a show that integrated the audience in a very organic way. And different parts of the storyline continued to blossom when they were seeing the reception of the audience, both during the production and the recording of these shows, and also the worldwide embrace of the beloved characters. And if you were to think about it, the whole production of the show really cost them as little as possible. They tried to do it with as little of a budget as they could, but they did an amazing job because they listened to their audience. And that's really the world that we live in now. The most successful movies and shows are the ones that you can become part of the story as an audience member, and those would be Harry Potter and Marvel and Star Wars, Star Trek. Those are the different franchises that continue to use that same type of system or the same type of relationship with the audience. The audience is not just somebody that comes, that pays to watch the movie and then leaves. They actually create the storyline in their own ways, in their own right, but also they produce and push forward the narratives of the story. And the most successful shows and movies will do that. The ones that don't do that, that don't care what the audience has to say, are the ones that do not run for as many seasons, and the ones who receive backlash at the end of their final episode. And the most clear reception of that is Game of Thrones. The writers in the last 2 seasons really did not take into account what the audience wanted to see. They did not progress the characters in the direction that the audience believed that they should be progressed, and many people were very disappointed at the end. And because of that, their new prequel, House of the Dragon, may or may not feel the backlash of people choosing not to tune in because they were not being listened to when Game of Thrones was being produced. And because of how well received Game of Thrones was at the beginning, it is disappointing to see that their ratings were so high and they almost let it all fall because they did not listen and produce the show that the audience wanted. Now, what are the what is the possible deterrences of writers not producing a show that the audience wants? Well, it can create characters into directions that they may not want them to, that they believe isn't the direction that they should be, which, if you think about in regards to Friends, Rachel in the first episode is running away from a wedding and from a relationship because she wanted to find who she is. And in the last episode, we see her really falling in love and choosing to be with someone, to marry someone, instead of being a fashion designer in Paris, which is part of the reason why she ran away from her first wedding, was because she didn't know who she was yet. Maybe that seems like a sort of letdown. And we see Phoebe, who was eccentric and the different character. She was the one who was considered weird, who she did what she wanted to. She was unlike the rest. We see her have a storyline where she also became a regular person and just got married. So we see a bit of a failure of the development of the characters, but we really do see an attention towards directing these characters to becoming what the audience wanted. And because they did that, they were able to close off, to tie a bow at the end of the 10th season, and they have no interest in reopening that. That may be a spoiler, but they are not planning on ever opening up the Friends storyline and producing another show. So if you thought the Friends reunion was like a continuation or 17 years later, they're back together, that is not what's happening. So I thought that's what was happening. I guess I really wasn't in the loop as much as I thought, but that was some of the things that I learned, and it really is up to you to decide what you're going to do with characters. And that is something that nobody ever listened to an audience before. Definitely not when Hollywood was producing movies. They did listen into the extent of who was watching this and who wasn't, and they would make money off of the people that would watch the movies and the shows. The more views a show got, the more likely it was going to be brought back for another season. If the ratings dropped, the show would eventually also be dropped. And if the ratings were high, the show is most likely to continue. But there also comes into questions, if a show is really, really good, how long can they keep that amazingness going until it stops being as amazing? And the truth of the matter is, it really depends. And sometimes there is a natural end to a show that needs to happen. And if it doesn't, it's going to ruin the show. If Game of Thrones had ended at season 6, many people would have been disappointed, but they would have been happier because of the progression of the characters was, in the view of the audience, organic and authentic and true to the characters that we grew to love over those 6 years. And when you think about it, if you do invest into a show, you are investing into the life of these characters. If you follow a show for 10 seasons and you're doing it by following it every single year, that's 10 years of a relationship that you are creating with these characters, and you are absolutely going to have an emotional bond to them. For 10 years, you're watching them every week, or, 6 months out of the year, you're watching them every week. And now we have definitely fast forwarded the time that we spend with characters, and we feel all those emotions very quickly, and we move on even quicker. So that might play into how we deal with relationships nowadays as well. We get into them really quick and we leave them very quickly, because that's how we also just consume entertainment on the daily basis. Many people binge watch shows where they will watch 5 seasons within 3 weeks. I've definitely done that. And there's many shows like Grey's Anatomy that have been on for 15 seasons, and people will binge watch it. And within 3, 4, 5 weeks, they will have watched all 15 seasons, which is 15 years of filming consumed in 5 weeks, which is not how the intention of entertainment is created. Or is it not? Is that how we are supposed to be consuming TV nowadays? Netflix has come out with limited series where it's 7 amazing episodes or 4 amazing episodes, and that's it. It's a complete story. You're not left in suspense. There's going to be another season. And some people choose not to watch it because there isn't that hope for another season. Some people love that that's part of it, that there's a complete storyline or not left hanging, that there was a thought out and understood ending that was planned. And that is something that may not happen as well. Oftentimes, it is within the last few weeks of producing the final few episodes, the writers are notified if they're going to get another season or not. Sometimes it's after the season is over that they're told there will be or there won't be another season. So it's a very precarious world when somebody else is making the decisions and is the gatekeeper of who can produce and who cannot. And those gatekeepers have always been the people in Hollywood, the ones who are on the boards, who are on the committees, who are deciding which movie's good and which movie's not. And we can see and attest to the past few years, and I'd say even further than that, the Oscars and different award shows have lost their credibility and their interest. I remember growing up, award shows were so interesting. Everybody would watch. They would talk about what they wore. It would be this huge production, and it still is to an extent. But whether it's an award show for music or for the movies, it's no longer what it once was because we can consume technology or we can consume entertainment at such a higher level that to sit down and watch on TV for 2.5 hours, somebody else saying this was a good movie and this wasn't, somebody else telling us how to perceive these movies, or who are these people on these committees, who's deciding this. The shows that are the most successful are the ones who the fans get to vote. So it's very interesting to see how much ownership the audience now currently has on the show. So it's interesting to see that shift and that change. So the Friends reunion was a wonderful way to pay homage to the show that many people who didn't grow up with it fell in love with it later on. And there's multiple shows that have done that. I know that The Golden Girls, Seinfeld, Friends, these are beloved shows by people who are definitely not the target audience of the time of the creation of that show, but because of how genuine the connection between the characters were. And if you think about it, the lives of the people on Friends and on Golden Girls or almost any other sitcom, even The Big Bang Theory, there's nothing extraordinary, but it's so funny and it's so interesting, and to an extent we can really identify with those characters, which is why it's so interesting. So it really falls into one of a few categories. It's a fantasy world, but you have to be able, it's a fantasy world or it's real life, but you have to be able to connect to the characters, to laugh, and to be able to become part of the storyline. That's really the different ingredients that make a successful show. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out. I know there's been lots of little clips floating around on YouTube, and it's an amazing place to really check out how such work was done and created at a time where you may not have expected that much enthusiasm for a show, but it is because the audience was a part of the decision that were made within the show that it was so successful. And that is how entertainment will be successful moving forward. If the person in the shows is relatable, if the audience can become part of the show, it will be a successful show more than not. If the audience is listened to and they are a stakeholder, and they will always be a stakeholder, they should be listened to, and their opinions should be perceived and understood and integrated. So, hope you got something out of today's video. We will talk soon, but until then, have an amazing day.